Welcome back to Through the Trapdoor. I'm Katie.
And I'm Emily.
And this is our podcast where we read you Harry Potter fan fiction.
So if we sound different this week, it's because we finally got pop filters.
Yes, and we're talking and recording with headphones on, so it's going to be a learning curve for us.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've made a big upgrade.
We have. This is this I think is the biggest change since changing the microphone.
Yeah, we got a new microphone. Now, several weeks later, we finally get pop filters.
Right, because Ben, who edits for us, got sick of our mouth noises.
Yeah, he was like, I can't handle the popping noises that you make or like the breathing noises of Katie anymore. Like, I can't handle it.
Because I'm just loud. I'm a loud breather. I'm a loud talker. I'm a loud laugher. It's just a fact.
You're just a loud person. It's fine.
All right, so today we're drinking more Staggering Unicorn wine, which should not be a surprise to any of you.
Because we're obsessed.
So obsessed. It's the blackberry wine. It's called Midnight.
Midnight.
We kind of have a thing for blackberry wine, huh?
We really do.
Yeah.
All right, so
Here's another nice long chapter for us.
should we recap what happened last week?
I don't remember what happened last week. Do you?
Uh,
I remember what happened 2 weeks ago, but that's because I just listened to the episode.
Vaguely.
Oh, wait, is that the chapter?
It's right here. Hang on. Let me, Do you want me to read to you the author's summary?
Oh, it's the holiday party.
Yeah.
Oh, because LaSalle is still missing.
Yep, LaSalle is still missing. They,
Had a Christmas party at the Snape's apartment.
yes, where Severus was wearing a black turtleneck, black pants, a brown house coat, and a green towel for his wet hair.
Right. One, he showered. What? But two, a turtleneck and pants.
And then Harry tried to break into the Slytherin common room, but Snape interrupted him.
Right. Oh, but Draco has a truth stone that was given to him by LaSalle, and
Yes.
it was glowing with Severus, and then he walked away, and then Harry set it off while he was underneath the invisibility cloak.
Yep.
Which makes sense because Harry would save a paper bag. Here we go. Poisons and Potions, Chapter 14. Classes resumed in January, and with them returned homework. Hermione's fears of the owls, Professor LaSalle, and Harry's detentions with Professor Snape. His first day back at this, Snape had handed him a parcel that held his invisibility cloak. Oh, I forgot Snape had his invisibility cloak.
That's right.
Snape made no comment, and Harry felt that he dare not ask, though he had a sneaking suspicion that the professor had not just merely taken it away as punishment. If he had, he would have surely not returned it so soon.
I wonder what Snape was doing with it.
I think he went to Malfoy Manor to spy on the Malfoys and LaSalle.
Ooh.
Everything else seemed to be back to normal, and after Harry finally finished with the potion storeroom in February, he decided against any more detentions. Okay, well, we'll see how long that lasts, Harry.
Harry, you're always in detention.
Perpetually in detention.
You lived your whole 5th year in detention.
Oh my god! Prediction number unlimited. What the hell? Incredibly, he and Ron managed to stay out of trouble all the way into April.
Impressive.
A whole month. Still, though the atmosphere seemed so calm, Harry couldn't help but feel this was all false sense of comfort. He had stayed true to his word to Snape, and he never revealed what he had heard that night to Ron. Silently, he wished he had never heard that conversation, for he felt alone in his worry, and it was easy to see why. Nothing had happened since the Chudley Cannons came. The Daily Prophet had gone on to report who was up for Witch Weekly's Most Handsome Smile Award, and minor magical infractions, such as a case involving a muggle woman and an illegal flying carpet. The woman and her house guests had unexpectedly found themselves floating near the ceiling during tea. It was as if Voldemort had suddenly disappeared again. No mysterious murders, no Death Eater raids, no disappearances, nothing. The only incident remotely stinking of the dark arts was the investigation of Malfoy Manor.
Well, you knew that Arthur was going to do that. He's the Minister of Magic now.
Right, and he always wants to investigate the Malfoys. This had made Ron smile for days into the possibility of illegal magic items. The only thing found was the dark unicorn in the stables, and that caused some stir as ministry officials in charge of the animal's destruction were found hit with a potent memory charm, and the unicorn was nowhere to be found. Unfortunately, Lucius Malfoy had just been forced to pay fines for possession of illegal and dangerous magical creature, and no charges were brought up for the disappearance. I need the spring charts for Northern Hampshire by next Friday, Professor Sinistra informed them late Friday night. Harry and Ron sleepily agreed as they left the astronomy tower. For the spring term, they had been given an option to take a half-year course, and they had decided on an astronomy course because the idea of sitting in the South Tower gazing at stars through a telescope had appealed to them at the time. Never mind that the exams were held late in the evening. She would have had to plan this test for the night before a Quidditch match. Harry reached behind his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. It was already midnight. Okay, well, if it's only midnight, you guys are like 15.
Yeah.
Don't tell me you were up till midnight sometimes when you were 15.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. Sitting on your computer or your phone or whatever. Not your phone because we didn't have phones. But
No.
sitting on the laptop in your bedroom even though you had been in bed since 9.
Yeah, reading under the covers with a flashlight.
Exactly.
You know.
Well, at least you can be thankful that that was the only class you had today. This was true. Earlier that day, Harry had been selected to help with Care of Magical Creatures field trip. Hagrid had taken some of the first years into the Forbidden Forest, which wasn't so bad during the day, but it definitely managed to deter some of the first years from ever wanting to wander into the forest again. Please remember that Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Draco had freaking detention at midnight
in the
Forbidden Forest to look for a injured unicorn and stumbled upon Voldemort drinking its blood.
Good times. But these first years, they're not, they can't handle that.
No. He was smiling broadly as he thought how wonderful the day had really been, missing both potions and defense against the dark arts, which had become unpleasant since Professor LaSalle had returned after the holidays acting much as his cousin. Snape's a slime ball, the new password, still made them snicker. Someone evidently had a bad day in potions. Ron snorted as he jumped through the portrait hole. Again, Harry was glad he missed that class, though Ron threw his book bag into the corner. Today, we were lucky. Lucky? Yeah, neither of the gruesome twosome bothered to show up, so they had begun to refer to the Snapes. McGonagall took over defense against the dark arts, and potions was canceled. Quick gist came before we go to bed? A sick feeling lodged itself in Harry's throat, and it felt like gillyweed as it slid uncomfortably into his stomach. Mr. Weasley surfaced in his mind, and he then felt a chill prickle up his spine. No, I think I'm going straight to bed. The match tomorrow, you know. Right. Ron noticed the sudden change. You all right, Harry? Harry was afraid to say anything, afraid that Ron may somehow suspect. He decided to remind him of Snape anyway. Ron, remember last year about Snape? Ron gave him a bewildered stare before it seemed to click. Oh, God, you don't think he's out with him and LaSalle out for Dumbledore, I mean? There was a large pop from the logs in the fireplace, and they both jumped. It was followed by a loud voice. Harry! George came bounding down the stairs. Where have you been? Astronomy exam. Is something the matter? Horribly, Fred answered. Soon, Dennis Creevy and the rest of the Gryffindor Quidditch team joined them. Harry doubted if the horribly wrong situation could rival what he had just been contemplating. What? My firebolt! The one I've been borrowing from Professor LaSalle? Dennis began. It's gone! Fred exclaimed hopelessly. LaSalle took it back? Harry wouldn't have been surprised. Professor LaSalle had been quite cantankerous. No, George said thoughtfully. It disappeared during a short practice. It was just Dennis, Fred, and me out on the field. I leaned it up against the side of the castle, near the locker rooms. Then, when I turned around, it was gone. Dennis looked desperate. Suddenly, Harry's mind flashed back to what he had heard Malfoy say to Pansy Parkinson on Christmas. Malfoy.
Dun, dun, dun.
My thoughts exactly. Both Fred and George looked angry. What are we going to do? Dennis piped up in a wail. We have to have it back before we play tomorrow. Yes, we do, Fred finished. We're up against Ravenclaw. They've got some excellent chasers this year. Harry glanced over at Ron. This was the last thing he wanted to do right now. His last attempt to enter Slytherin Common Room had been a complete disaster. And this would mean not only going into the Common Room, but going into Draco Malfoy's bedroom to take something. What do you suppose we do? Harry hoped someone had a better idea than him. We could go to Professor McGonagall, Katie suggested. But what if he told her he just didn't have it? Dennis shot back. Well, we'd have to wait for Professor Snape to get back, or, well, from wherever he is, to search for it. By then, Malfoy could hide it. We need to get it tonight, Harry, Fred urged. Harry couldn't believe he was attempting this again. He had insisted on going alone for the same reason that he did before. Also, he was afraid what Snape might do if he caught him sneaking out again. His hope for the Slytherin password to be the same as it was at Christmas was crushed when he stood for a long time in front of the wall. Pure blood. Mudblood. Snakes? Hex?
Those would be Harry's guesses.
Harry was stumped. Harry ran through all the words he could think of that might possibly make a good Slytherin password. Irritated, he stomped his foot. Come on! He was just about to leave. I have to get in there, or will not stand a chance at the Quidditch match. And suddenly, it opened, revealing the entrance. Quidditch? Harry couldn't believe it.
I can. It seems like a very Draco thing to do.
Quietly, he slipped in to Slytherin territory. The common room was empty, it being already 1 a.m. This was good, and because everyone was most likely asleep, it would be easy for him to get the broom and spirit it away. And only first, he'd have to find Malfoy's room. There were 2 doors on either side of the fireplace. Harry chose the left one first. There was no spiral staircase, but a long hallway with lit torches lined with paintings and doors. There was green carpet running the length of the hall that muffled his footsteps. He was glad it did, for he heard a dwarf in one of the paintings stir and grumble lowly, "Who's there?" before he began to snore. With bated breath, he carefully approached the first door. Just as he reached for the silver knob, the door sprang open, causing him to sprawl backwards onto the floor, his cloak slipping off one of his legs. The figure just walked out of the door, however, seemed too sleepy to notice, and Harry had a chance to get to his feet and reposition his cloak so that he was completely hidden. Once he had calmed down and his heart rate returned to normal, he focused on whom it was that had passed through the doorway, which led to a water closet. He couldn't believe his luck. Goyle. Ha ha ha. Good old Greg.
Yep.
Goyle was lumbering barefoot down the hall, wearing a pair of garish purple flannel pajamas. Harry hurried after, following him into one of the last doors. Vincent Crabbe was snoring loudly from a nearby bed. In a bed across the room, there was a boy whom Harry couldn't place, for he had a pillow situated over his head. probably to muffle the snores coming from Crabbe, and then chorused in by Goyle. Harry gazed around the circular room with the 4 poster beds, just like his own, only all the upholstery was emerald green, though the light of the full moon washed much of the color out. It reminded him of Lupin. He hoped he had gotten his potion before Snape had taken off. A wave of guilt swept over him. There were so many things going on tonight, and here he was breaking the rules on account of a Quidditch match.
Canon.
I was going to say, fact. Super canon, Harry.
Super canon.
Then again, this was Malfoy's fault. He wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. Then that's when he noticed him, asleep in the bed by the window. On the night table beside sat a basket of cookies with a red tag. With love from your mother, XOXOXO. Next to it, leaned against the wall, was what he was looking for. There were 2 firebolts, one that had golden writing in a Slavic language. Quickly he grabbed this broom and situated it under his cloak. It would be best if he left as soon as possible. However, as he looked back over at Malfoy, asleep and completely unaware and unsuspecting, his temptation was too great. He withdrew his wand and pointed at Malfoy's throat. Ceronius Harilosa. A teeny waft of silver shot out of his wand and melted into Malfoy's neck. A cute little squeaky voice will be befitting of a ferret boy. He turned to leave, but then spotted the cookies again. He tapped the card with his wand. It now read, "With love from Harry." Before he could think of anything else to do, he hurried from the room, satisfied that Malfoy wouldn't dare rat him out for fear he'd be accused of trying to sabotage a Quidditch match.
Fair.
Fair.
But still, Harry, you're an idiot.
Super idiot. Feeling very good about himself, but also realizing he'd only have a few hours before he'd have to be up again in the morning, he hurried up from the dungeons and kept a stealth eye out for Filch or Mrs. Norris. As he ran along the corridors and up onto the main floor, he was nearing the marble staircase near the front doors when he suddenly slipped. There had been something wet on the floor, and he landed with a grunt onto the stone floor, the firebolt clattering down beside him. Heart pounding, he glanced around. There seemed to be no one about, though strangely he noticed that the main doors had been left ajar. Deciding it best to go to bed, he stood up and made sure that he and the firebolt were all concealed. Then noticed that his hands were covered in a dark liquid. He looked down at the liquid on the floor. By the light of the torches, he could tell it was blood. There wasn't a whole lot, not like some great puddles he'd seen in some of the movies Dudley would watch, but big dollops that led away from the entrance and down the hall. A cold, eerie chill passed through him. He now felt like one of those characters in Dudley's movies. Only they never had an assailant with a magic wand, Harry thought. Or, for that matter, they weren't invisible. His curiosity getting the best of him.
Canon.
He followed the trail of blood where it led around the corner and decided to stop. He could hear someone getting sick and the heavy footfalls of someone laboriously shuffling along. Slowly, he peered around the corner. 2 black, shrouded figures were making their way towards the mirror that led to the staff quarters. Both looked injured, but both were clearly having the worst time of it. Then Harry noticed one of the cloaked figures was gripping a mage's staff. The cloaked figure was using the staff as support, as well as being held up by the companion. Suddenly, he stopped. They started throwing up again and then collapsed on the floor, heaving before finally laying still. "Salazar! Salazar! Come on, we're almost there!" It was Snape's voice. He leaned over the figure laying crumpled on the floor and tore off the skull-like mask. The Death Eater mask gave Harry the chills, but seeing what was underneath it did so even more. LaSalle's face had taken on the same complexion as Nearly Headless Nick and was covered in droplets of sweat. Then he got a glimpse of Snape's face. Blood was streaming down his face from a painful licking gash in his left temple. He had to wipe away a drop that was running into his eye with his hand also covered in blood. "Damn it, LaSalle! It's not supposed to work this fast!" Snape's voice trembled. Desperately, he turned towards the mirror. "Dumbledore, where are you?" Harry couldn't stand to watch any longer. He dropped the broom and removed his cloak and strode up to Professor Snape, who clearly jumped defensively, his wand in his hand. He lowered it when he realized it was Harry, and then seemed almost a look of relief swept over his face. He then controlled and straightened his features. "Potter, what are you?" "Where's Dumbledore? I'll get him." Snape looked stunned. "In the staff quarters. You'll find the entrance to his office." With a quick nod, Harry hurried over, jumped through the frame, and went sprinting down the hall. He had just about reached the gargoyle when he spotted Dumbledore striding towards him. Harry stopped and tried to catch his breath before speaking, but he didn't need to explain. "They've returned." It was more a statement rather than a question. "How bad off are they?" "Professor Snape, bleeding bad." Dumbledore had started to hurry back towards the mirror, and Harry filled him in. "Professor LaSalle is worse off. Not bleeding, but unconscious. Snape seems real worried." At this, Dumbledore broke into a longer stride. Harry followed after through the mirror. When he passed through, Dumbledore was already kneeling down at LaSalle's side. "Severus, what happened?" "Poison." Dumbledore glanced up, taking in Snape's blood-soaked robes. Harry realized that he must have been wounded elsewhere besides the cut on his head, for there were steady trickles of blood running down the left sleeve over his hand. It was surprising that he hadn't collapsed. "I'll take him to his room. You work on getting the antidote, and take Harry with you," Dumbledore added as an afterthought. His voice seemed to have changed after meeting Snape's eyes. Snape didn't seem to have the resources to object. He just turned on his heel and headed for the dungeons. "Harry," Dumbledore said lowly, "make sure he sees to taking care of himself." Harry nodded before turning to run after Professor Snape. Snape staggered into the potions lab. With a flick of his wand, the torches along the walls ablazed, lighting up the cold room. "Potter, I need you to get a number 2 cauldron, silver, and place it over the Bunsen on the table." He smacked his right hand down on the nearest table, and then began to pry off his Death Eater robes. When Harry returned from the storeroom with the cauldron, Snape had taken out a jar of some clear liquid and a beaker. With a shaking hand, he poured the liquid from the jar into the beaker and removed a small black flask from his robes and added the contents. Rapidly, the mixture began to change color, and Snape scribbled down each change on a leaf of paper until it finally became black. Once the liquid stopped changing colors, it began to bubble violently and off to the side. Snape wrote, "Mandrake extract." His writing was horribly messy as he then went down the list of different reactions and wrote down different ingredients beside each. Quag grease, Hogwarts lily, narwhal bile,
Narwhal.
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 He handed the list to Harry. "All of these are here, quick!" Snape's voice was hoarse. Before Harry turned away, he caught him grasping his arms and wincing. "Professor, you should take care of yourself. I can't make this. You need to." "I can take care of myself, Potter. Now get those ingredients." Without another word, Harry returned to the storeroom. He snatched up a bowl and began to gather the jars. Those weeks he had spent helping Snape now came in good use. He knew exactly where everything was. Also, before he left, he recalled something. Something came to mind from his first year, and he figured that Snape was in so much pain that he had forgotten to include something so elementary, and he snatched up a jar full of Bezoar stones on his way out. To his relief, Snape was in the process of trying to fix and bandage his left shoulder, which, through a tear in his robes, was seen to be blackened and oozing blood. Harry set down the ingredients and scooted around to the table. Cautiously, He reached up and grabbed the end of the bandage, which had been dangling over Snape's back, out of reach. Snape allowed him to finish wrapping his wound, and he started to sort through ingredients. The Bezoar stones were the first item thrown into the cauldron. As Snape got to work, all Harry began to do was hand him certain ingredients and measuring devices. However, Snape's wounds began to slow him down. At one point, he attempted to pour mandrake extract into a small test tube, but his hand was shaking so horribly that hardly any liquid was finding its way into the tube. Here, Harry grabbed it from him. How much? To the half mark. Snape's voice became so coarse and weary that Harry was suddenly scared that he'd pass out before the potion was completed. Despite this, there seemed to be a spark of loathing in his eyes. Harry realized he was in a dangerous position. In Snape's lab, Snape was rendered rather helpless. For the rest of the time, Harry focused on precisely following what Snape told him and avoiding any eye contact. The potion took less than a half an hour to make, but it seemed as if hours had passed by the time that simmering concoction was poured into a goblet. This Snape placed in Harry's hands. Take this to Salazar. Be careful not to drop it.
I bet you Harry drops it.
I bet you he does. Firmly grasping the goblet with both hands, Harry headed over to the door, then realized Snape was not coming. He turned around and evidently the look on his face asked the question. I need to take care of myself, Potter. Snape answered, now get going. Don't make me try and get that to him. Okay, Snape. That's like the mom. Don't make me turn this car around.
I will do it.
When you know they won't.
Yeah.
They never will.
No.
His words were not to be questioned, and Harry hurried out as quick as he could. As soon as he left the potions lab, the image of LaSalle's face flashed in his mind. Harry drove his legs to carry him faster, though he had to be careful that he didn't spill any. Then he remembered a simple charm from Flitwick's class. Stopping briefly, he withdrew his wand and cast a charm on the lip of the goblet, sealing the potion in. Afterward, he sprinted down the hall. He was out of breath by the time he reached Snape's apartment. When he burst in, panting, through the door, he heard Dumbledore's voice. We're back here, Harry! Harry hurried down the back hall to a room he hadn't seen before, the one that LaSalle and Snape shared. Dumbledore was seated on the edge of the bed, where a deathly pale, hardly breathing LaSalle lay. Harry waved his wand over the goblet to remove the sealing charm before handing it to him. How is Professor Snape? Dumbledore asked as he poured the steaming liquid between LaSalle's parted lips. He stayed behind to take care of his wounds, but he needs Madame Pomfrey. Dumbledore said nothing in return and only fed the rest of the potion to LaSalle before sitting back and looking over at Harry. Now all we can do is wait and pray. He placed the empty goblet on the nightstand and stood up. Now, come sit with me. He placed a withered but surprisingly strong hand on Harry's shoulder, leading him over to an antique sofa. They both sat, watching LaSalle for a while before Dumbledore spoke up again. I suppose that you now have a whole new understanding of Professor Severus Snape. Harry looked up into those ancient blue eyes, so full of patience, wisdom, and buried deep a burning spark. I was hoping not to put these two through this again, especially Severus. He's served his time. There was a pause in which Harry only wished he could hear what the thoughts were passing through Dumbledore's mind. I believe that I answered you wrong when you inquired something about me in the first year here. In reply to your question, what I saw in the mirror of Ezrad, the corners of Dumbledore's mouth turned slightly upward from beneath his beard, though to Harry his eyes looked as though they were about to shed a tear. I think I can tell you now what I see. I see many different people, but always the same thing. I see bright futures for all of the students here at Hogwarts. I see you, perhaps even the headmaster, here after I'm gone. I see your friend Ron happy with a family, very successful. I see Draco Malfoy doing good in the world. When I said some men have become obsessed with what they see in the mirror, so have I. To some degree, seeing that come true to the best of my abilities has become my life's work. and anyone willing to help me make it come true is very important to me. Such as Professor Snape, who stands in the forefront of the battle to see these dreams come true. Dumbledore paused and removed his spectacles. Harry, you won't speak about this to anyone? Of course not, Professor. Harry didn't even have to think about his response. Dumbledore replaced his glasses and focused on Harry. You must be destined for great things. Always winding up in situations such as these, but it is good. It is nights like these where you can learn more than you could ever during your year of studies, though some lessons we prefer not to learn, such as death and guilt. Guilt? Harry said mildly, watching the faint raise and fall of LaSalle's chest and then face back towards Dumbledore. Dumbledore seemed to take interest in watching LaSalle again. Severus Snape is one of the proudest men you'll ever meet, and not bad pride, but more an old sense of honor as described in the old days of chivalry. Immediately, Harry's thoughts strayed to the greasy black figure looming at the head of a classroom, passing out cutting remarks. Surely he couldn't be talking about the same man. All of these things that Dumbledore was saying about the man he hated so much was making him feel awkward. You remember when he saved your life to pay off a debt he owed to your father? The question wasn't meant to be answered, but Harry nodded. It is clear Severus wears his guilt pinned onto his heart. You discovered something of his past last year. He'll never be able to let go of what he did while in Voldemort's circle. I don't think any man could, though with Severus, with his sense of honor, it's much harder on him, and it's made him a little bitter over the years. A little? Harry snorted and then regretted it as he caught the pained look that Dumbledore gave him. I never told anyone this, and I'm certain Severus would never wish me to disclose this, but I believe someone needs to hear it, and that someone is you. I mean, that's canon. Dumbledore is going to tell Harry every goddamn thing.
Yep.
Dumbledore's tone became extremely grave, almost sad. That life debt he owed your father runs far deeper than the mischief masters Moony, Padfoot, Wormtail, and Prongs. Snape saving your life on the Quidditch field your first year here wasn't the first time he tried repaying that debt. No, he tried to repay it while your father was still alive. He had the chance, but it came less than an hour too late. There was an uncomfortable and anxious feeling in the air, as Harry knew whatever was about to be said might change the way he looked at certain people. Severus knew where your parents were staying. They were hiding out as muggles at the time. Dumbledore continued, the night they were killed, he overheard something Voldemort had said that alerted him that their whereabouts had been discovered. Immediately, he suspected Sirius, believing he had been the secret keeper. His loathing for Sirius made him search for him before alerting your parents. But by the time he gave up on Black and headed to your parents' house, it was too late. That night, he was the first on the scene, the first one to find you. Harry was stunned. The words were swirling in his mind, clouded and muddled. Dumbledore let out a sigh. Tonight has me extremely worried, Harry. You see, the outward wounds that Severus received, and no doubt some horrible thing has happened that we all will soon hear about, but I saw a wounding that went much deeper. What I saw in Severus's eyes tonight, I have not seen since the night I found him standing over the bodies of your parents. What?
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh my.
I love this story so much.
So much.
Thank you so much for joining us on our journey through the trap door.
Please leave us a review on Facebook or iTunes. It would literally mean the world to us.
It really would.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Through the Trapdoor 16 or on Twitter at The Trapdoor.
And please send us an email at throughthetrapdoor16@gmail.com with any story suggestions. And as always, join us again next Saturday as we travel through the trapdoor.